Only a few short decades after these scathing critiques, Scotland had transformed into one of the most advanced societies in the world. From the mid 1700s to early 1800s, Scotland produced some of the most groundbreaking intellectual achievements in history. Men like David Hume revolutionized philosophy. Adam Smith invented ideas on capitalism that laid the foundation for modern economics. And James Watt, whose innovations in engineering powered the Industrial Revolution, capturing the world. Glasgow and Edinburgh joined the wealthiest cities of the world. The Scottish, for a moment, were the most educated, inventive, and rich people in the world. How did this happen? All manner of disciplines, economists, sociologists, historians, they've all chipped in on this debate. Essentially, the transformation of Scotland is a tale of two narratives, one of enlightenment and progress, and the other of exploitation and displacement. At the heart of Scotland's rise, at the very core, at the very beginning, was a revolutionary idea: education for all. All the way back in 1560, reformer John Knox proposed a national school system in his first book of discipline. This wasn't just an idle dream. By 1696, the Scottish Parliament mandated a school and a schoolmaster in every parish. This act laid the foundation for widespread literacy that would become Scotland's secret weapon. Within decades, Scotland boasted one of the highest literacy rates in the entire world. By 1750, it's estimated that 75% of Scots could read, a staggering figure for the time, maybe only rivaled by countries like Switzerland. This educational revolution wasn't limited to just literacy. Scotland's universities embraced new ideas, teaching practical subjects alongside classical learning, using empirical methods and the scientific method to find new knowledge. The result? A population primed for innovation. Another pivotal moment came in 1707 with the Act of Union. Scotland joined England to form Great Britain, gaining access to vast new markets and opportunities. Suddenly, Scottish merchants could trade freely with England and its colonies. Scottish intellectuals found a wider audience for their ideas. The Union, while controversial, provided the economic and intellectual fuel for Scotland's transformation. The results were explosive. As I mentioned, David Hume, Adam Smith, and James Watt all revolutionized their respective fields. Glasgow and Edinburgh became hubs of learning and commerce, rivaling the greatest cities in the world. But there's another crucial factor that isn't often considered in Scotland's intellectual revolution in discussions of this topic: the embrace of the English language. The Scottish Enlightenment thinkers recognized that mastering English was key to reaching a wider audience with their ideas and participating in the global discourse to get ideas from other places. David Hume, in a letter to a friend, lamented his own, quote, narrow, provincial accent and urged fellow Scots to perfect their English. He saw it as essential for Scotland to fully engage with the broader intellectual world. Likewise, Adam Smith lectured on rhetoric and belles lettres, emphasizing the importance of clear, elegant English prose. These efforts weren't just about personal advancement for Scots, they were about putting Scottish ideas on the world stage. As Scottish people mastered English, their ideas spread far beyond their borders. Scottish thinkers became integral to the broader European and American Enlightenment, shaping global thought in ways that would have been impossible if they remained linguistically isolated. They would not have caught wind of these intellectual movements, and they wouldn't have been able to make their impact. Now, these lines of analysis, emphasizing the development of human capital through education and practical work, the generation of wealth through free and open trade, and finally the broadening of intellectual horizons through abandoning local traditions in favor of English and joining the wider world, this follows the classic liberal school of thought. For example, Thomas Sowell has written extensively to this end in books like Wealth, Poverty, and Politics. But I feel like this doesn't tell the whole story. It's too perfect to just say that a whole nation pulled itself up by its bootstraps. There are some darker truths that have to come in. A critical analysis reveals that Scotland's prosperity was built, in part, on exploitation and suffering. The slave trade played a significant role in Scotland's economic boom. Glasgow's tobacco lords amassed fortunes from slave-produced goods, and many Scots were deeply involved in the slave trade and plantation management in the Americas, whether in the West Indies or involved with the United States. Meanwhile, at home, the Highland clearances were reshaping the Scottish landscape. Thousands of Highlanders were forcibly evicted from their lands to make way for sheep farming massive landlords were able to take land from local peasant farmers. And later, many of these displaced Scots were forced to immigrate, spreading Scottish influence worldwide, but at a tremendous human cost. People losing their homes, people having to leave. These fortunes, earned by the lords from the tobacco industry or the massive landlords in Scotland, earned in the slave economy or these massive estates, as Stephen McLaren from The Guardian points out, would later fund the infrastructure and capital that would industrialize and make Scotland rich in the 1800s. So, how do we square these two narratives? The classic liberals would point to a counterexample and de emphasize the role of exploitation and favor the role of human capital in what actually creates wealth. So, for example, along these lines, the Spanish Empire during the 1500s to 1700s, with its famously brutal exploitation of the New World and indigenous peoples, saw no such rapid development during the height of the silver and gold inflows from the New World. Spaniards would boast that the world toils and Spain buys the fruits. The lesson here being, Spain made a fatal error in failing to invest in the education and local production of its nation, favoring instead a kind of complacent decadence. But does Scotland's more prudent use of slave economy profits make it less morally reprehensible? No. Critical analysts, on the other hand, from the classical liberals, would say, let's reject the idea that exploitation was economically counterproductive. The richest European nations, whether the UK, Netherlands, or France, were extravagant slavers. You can't avoid that fact. Just because Spain and Portugal, countries that were also involved with slavery, fell behind, doesn't conclusively prove that the wealth of these Western nations wasn't built partially off the backs of exploitation. Overall, I feel the meteoric rise of Scotland ought to be taught more in schools. The country, along with its compatriots like Japan and Taiwan, give us a glimpse into what can make a society and culture ascendant instead of falling behind. There are timeless lessons here. Emphasize universal education participation, take the best ideas from societies ahead of yours, participate in the global discussion, and don't cling to traditions or language too tightly. Wise intellectual and political leadership can make a real difference. However, we can't hide from the dark parts of this story. Chattel slavery and the brutality in the Highlands can't be separated from the Scottish story. I hope we can integrate Scotland's progressive wisdom with a healthy critical eye for the dark parts of the story.